Great. Well, welcome everyone to our annual Women in Science event in celebration of the 2026 International Day of Women and Girls in Science. I'm Michelle Hackett from the CSIRO Staff Association. And this year we are fortunate enough to have Claudia Lagos as our guest speaker, who we will introduce very shortly. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the various lands in which we're meeting today. I'm in Perth, so that's Wajak Noongar Boodja, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. So welcome, or kaya everyone. Today's event is proudly brought to you by CSIRO Staff Association members. The CSIRO Staff Association is a section of the Community and Public Sector Union, and its cause is to protect and progress the interest of our members in CSIRO and in society. So after the last event, and most of the others, I had many staff asking for more information about the Staff Association and how to get involved. So we'll put a link to our website in the chat very shortly. And for those without chat, the website is cirostaff.org.au. We have some wonderful Staff Association members and staff helping to run today's event. Some behind the scenes, managing afternoon teas, morning teas, and viewing rooms. And we have Vanessa Moss and Bree Morgan as our on-camera team. So Vanessa and Bree both work in the Space and Astronomy Research Unit at CSIRO. Vanessa is an astronomer. She heads the ASCAP radio telescope science operations, among other work in automation, data, and distributed collaboration. And Bree is our field technician. She's helped establish the Square Kilometre Array telescope and now works with the deep space antennas at New Norcia. So thank you to Bree and Vanessa and all those involved today. I'll shortly pass over to Vanessa to introduce Claudia, then to Bree for the conversation. We'll have time at the end of today's event for questions. So please be ready when we get to the Q&A to either pop your questions in the chat or raise your virtual hand to request to be unmuted. So we are hosting this event via webinar, which means that your videos and mic, that they won't work unless you click the raise hand button to request to be unmuted, and Anthony will help us out with that. Then we'll know to give you access to unmute and put your video on. And importantly, as we probably heard earlier, just a quick note to say that we are recording today's event. Okay. That's enough housekeeping from me. It's time to get on with the main event. Vanessa, would you very kindly introduce our guest speaker? I believe you've met her before.
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, I have. So hey, everyone. I'm really happy to be here for the Women in Science event today and be part of this and getting to introduce Claudia Lagos, who's going to be interviewed shortly. So we've actually known each other for, I think we figured it was like over a decade. I thought it was around a decade. And we've crossed paths in lots of different ways over time. One of the key ways is working on one of the ASCAP surveys flash together, but there's lots of other work. The astronomy community is a little small after a while. So about Claudia, I'm really happy to introduce everyone to her. Claudia grew up stargazing in beautiful Chile and has gone on to build a career in imagining and simulating the formation of galaxies. Claudia is now a professor at the University of Western Australia as part of the International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research, or ICRA. And she obtained her PhD from Durham University in 2013. This early work won her international recognition, including the 2013 Springer Thesis Prize, which recognizes the best PhD theses in physics worldwide, and also the 2014 MERAC Prize for the best PhD thesis in theoretical physics in theoretical astrophysics in Europe. This led to her home country, Chile, to recognize her as one of the 100 women leaders in Chile and one of the 100 young leaders in 2014. So after working in the European Southern Observatory in Germany, Claudia joined the University of Western Australia's ICRA team in 2015 as a theoretical and computational astrophysicist. Claudia is renowned for her creation of SHARC, which is an open source model of the universe, and has led to breakthroughs in our understanding of the complex physics of galaxy formation. She's also been on the editorial board of Astronomy and Computing since 2023, and I probably should send some papers that way sometime soon. In July last year, Claudia won the Anne Green Prize from the Astronomical Society of Australia, which recognises a significant advance or accomplishment by a mid-career scientist. So this is one of the big awards of the society. And she's a joint recipient of the Australian Academy of Sciences Pawsey Medal for outstanding early career research in physics in 2025. She's been the Vice President of the Astronomical Society of Australia since 2025, and we work together there on advocating for astronomy nationwide. And she'll become President of the Society from mid-2027. Claudia, throughout her career, has been a keen advocate for equity and diversity in astronomy, and that's going to be explored as part of the interview today, and has been kind enough to agree to be the guest speaker for this 2026 Women in Science event. So welcome, Claudia, and really great to have you with us today.
Thank you,
Thank
Vanessa.
you, Vanessa. And Claudia, I'll now pass over to Bree, who will lead our conversation. Over to you, Bree and Claudia. And if everyone else doesn't mind popping their cameras on, or turning off their cameras, we'll start the conversation. Thank you, ladies.
I guess we'll start right at the beginning. How did you initially become interested in space and science, and how were you able to launch that into a career?
Yeah, so as Vanessa was saying, I'm from Chile. So astronomy in Chile is something that is very culturally appreciated because over the past 60 years, more or less, more and more optical telescopes primarily have been located there, big telescopes that are used by astronomers worldwide. So there is kind of a fascination in the people of Chile about astronomy and the fact that we have this kind of natural advantage of very clear, clean skies to do astronomy. So I always got the feeling that there's kind of an appreciation of that. Having said that, I grew up in a very busy city, so you can't really see many stars in the night sky. But I was always fascinated by some of the more maybe abstract ideas of the universe. Like since I was probably 12, 13, then I started reading more about these ideas of an expanding universe and different models of a universe that might actually collapse back or might expand forever and so on. And I kind of became fascinated by these abstract ideas that were kind of challenging potentially the more maybe religious upbringing that we have in our society of an infinite universe and so on. But it kind of became real to me that we were in this much more dynamic universe. And then I became fascinated in like reading more and more, and I was kind of using the little pocket money I had in buying books actually and reading more. So that's kind of how I became fascinated by these big concepts. And then as I was progressing into my high school years, and I realized I was actually quite good at some of the maths and physics, and I enjoyed that quite a lot. Then right before going to uni, kind of I started thinking, what am I gonna do, right? The normal path for someone that it's good at math and physics is going to engineering, civil engineering or something like that. That's kind of what would be expected of people, or back then at least. So that was kind of, yeah, sure, I'll do engineering. But then in talking to a literature teacher that was kind of someone I bounced a lot of ideas with, he suggested that I take a different path. He said, why don't you take something really challenging, something that that is different and might actually be more rewarding. And then when I actually thought, I've always liked astronomy, and maybe I'll take up that challenge. So that's when I decided to go into a bachelor in astronomy that is offered, that it was offered at the time just in a couple of universities in the country. So that's how basically the journey started. And I did this bachelor in astronomy. It was quite focused on more observational astronomy, given kind of that heritage I was talking about in the country. But I realized about mid-career that my call was very much on the theory side of things. And that's what I enjoy the most. So when I had the opportunity to start doing research, I immediately decided to focus it more on theory. And I got lucky as well of, finding the right mentors for that. And one of my supervisors back in Chile, he really shaped a lot of kind of that motivation and channeling that into studies of galaxies and using simulations. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started, and that's also what led me eventually to apply for a PhD in the UK, particularly in Durham University, that has a big institute that's called the Institute for Computational Cosmology. So it was very much the topic that I wanted to pursue. So it was the obvious place to go. And that's how I ended up there, really. It was like from that belief that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of exploit that more theoretical understanding of concepts of the universe. And I also started to get kind of more fascinated by the more technical challenges in, coding, software, and so on. So that kind of all ended up kind of being brought together in this path that I was taking. So yeah, that's roughly how things ended up happening, and that like shaped my career afterwards.
That's quite an amazing journey, especially from such a young age to know that you were interested in that and then to develop that and every single turn just being like, I'm going to follow this path and having that faith in yourself. It's very, very inspiring, actually. But then after those studies, what type of work did you find yourself doing in Europe? And then how did you end up here in Australia?
Yeah. So when I was basically when I went to the UK, the PhD there was 3 years. I think here in Australia right now is 3.5 years. Used to be 3, now it's 3.5, so quite similar. But that gave me kind of a lot of time to continue to go further and deeper into these ideas of what are the processes, physical processes behind how galaxies are evolving. And that was kind of the overarching question that I had in my mind. And kind of using different numerical tools, if you want to address that. So I kind of went deeper into that, more into, developing new models for, especially I was very interested in how stars form, how the gas around them kind of allows these stars to form to start with. And kind of developing that part of galaxy evolution a lot further than people had done before, at least for these kind of large scale simulations that I was working with. So after that, I was actually, so during my time in the UK, I was in a long distance relationship. My partner, who's from Chile as well, was lucky enough to actually find an opportunity in Germany at the same time that I was going to the UK. So he was in Germany the whole time, and I was in the UK, which is not too bad because, flights in Europe can be quite cheap. But still, I mean, it's a big effort. And so I was flying all the time back, and he was flying to see me. So when it came to applying for jobs post PhD, I was absolutely certain that I wanted to continue in academia. I wanted to continue doing research, but I had a big constraint in where I wanted to be, right? So what I did at the time was basically prioritize all the places I could work with around where he was, and then expand a bit the radius, right? Maybe in the country next door, maybe Switzerland would do, I don't know, that kind of thing. And I was lucky enough that at the European Southern Observatory, they actually took a big bet in hiring me. So it was an interesting bet for them and for me because it's a primarily observational place, and most of the astronomers, or all of the astronomers back then, were doing observational astronomy, and I'm a theorist applying to work there, right? So they had a lot of doubts whether that would work, also because the institute next door to ESO, it's a hub of theoretical astrophysics. So they were wondering, are we hiring someone that's just going to cross the street and work with people there rather than us, which is, I guess, a fair concern. And my concern was like, how am I going to fit into this community where, they will speak a very different language. Obviously, we're all interested ultimately in the same things, but deciding to address these questions very differently. So they did ended up, shortlisting me, interviewing me, and in preparing for that interview, I put a lot of thought on just answering the one question of why here? Why do you want to come here? So then my supervisors at the time helped me a lot, actually. They were really great mentors in preparing some of these, and trying to see what actually would convince people. They knew also my constraints, right? Personal constraints. So I think I convinced them because they did offer me the job. But in talking to people there over the years, they kind of were quite open in the challenging conversations they had. Like a lot of people there were against offering me a job, while others were, I think we should take the risk here. And I think for everyone it paid off because I really put a huge effort in becoming a contributing member of the community there, in not only research wise, but also in terms of creating a culture of community, creating a culture of collaboration. So I kind of organized usually a lot of weekly events where I would invite people, discuss different topics. I ended up working a lot with many of the members there, either other research fellows like I was, or staff members. I also ended up working a bit on the mountain bike in Chile. So I do have some photos to share about that if you're interested. So I ended up actually using a fraction of my time in actually learning about the telescopes and learning about how they work and helping operate them. So I feel like that was probably a pivoting time in my career, in that things could have gone very differently if I took a different path, because that kind of opened a whole community for me. I became kind of a trusted member of the community. And, when people had all these beautiful observations, they started coming to me to ask, well, can you help me understand what's going on? Can we check in your simulations what this might be telling us? And that kind of conversation became like a regular thing. And then I became more involved in other projects that were primarily observational, but I was there kind of the theorist in the room. So yeah, I think it really changed the way I think, and it changed also the perception of a lot of people around how do we bring together different expertise to advance a problem, right? So yeah, that was kind of a bit of the time at ESO. And my husband also happened to work at ESO as well. He's actually a software engineer, but he was working developing software for telescopes there. So we ended up in the same institute at the end of the day. It's a big institute, so it's not that we saw each other very often, but at least in the day. But yeah, that was kind of quite interesting. And yeah, I can share actually some of those experiences in the mountain, because it's quite kind of a fascinating thing when you think about where these telescopes are. So that kind of took me all the way around, going back to Chile. So there is this beautiful telescope. Let me see if I can share some of these. Yeah, let me put this up. So there is this beautiful 2 mm telescope in Chile that's called ALMA, so Atacama Large Millimeter Array. And if people don't know, ALMA means soul in English. So it's quite a meaningful name in what the instrument is trying to do. So it's this kind of array, I think we're all pretty familiar with in Australia, of having all these kind of antennas working together, right? But because this is 2 mm, it actually needs to be placed in a place where the atmosphere is very thin. So it's a very high altitude. It's a 5,000 meters from sea level in a mountain in Chile. That's where the antennas are. And the control room, when I was going to observe there, was at 3,000 meters. So still pretty, pretty high. And at the time when I was working there, actually, it looked a lot like the video here, early days of the telescope. We actually didn't have proper accommodation. We were kind of, very temporary buildings here before the proper residence was built. So the conditions were actually pretty extreme in terms of, extremely dry weather, extremely high UV. If you were going up to the 5,000 meter, you had to carry oxygen. So a lot of kind of fun memories of that time and, different strategies for dealing with this high altitude. So yeah, this is just a photo of me when I visited some of these antennas at the 5,000 meter. And then on the left hand, you see a photo of me in one of the transporters. So these antenna transporters, they're huge, right? They use the whole highway. They don't fit in one of the lanes. And they move extremely slowly, of course. So I was looking at some of these big kind of transporters, and funny enough, in one of my kids' books of like big machines in the world, they actually happen to have this big antenna transporter there. So it's fun to see. So yeah, that was kind of part of my time at ESO and what I did, kind of what they call like more functional work at ESO. But obviously, I kind of continued a lot my research that was still very much focused on what gas in galaxies was doing. So sorry, I just wanted to share that because it's quite fascinating. And I'll go back to the other window.
Excellent. It sounds like you've had quite an interesting journey across your entire career, and especially getting to go visit other telescopes and meet so many different people and experience so many different things. You're currently working as an astrophysicist in UWA. What would you say are some of the highlights of your career, or something that you've enjoyed the most?
Yeah. So, right, like before answering that, I should probably say, how did I end up here? And actually, that pretty much goes back to the SKA. So it was around, I guess, my time as a PhD student that it was decided the SKA, or part of the SKA, was going to be hosted in Western Australia. And that launched, as many of you at CSIRO would know, that launched a big effort to bring expertise and to build that capacity in Western Australia, right? So that looks like engineers, that looks like researcher, that looks like many, many things, right? That didn't actually exist before in Western Australia. A lot of the expertise was in place in Australia as a whole, but not necessarily in the States. And also it was kind of recognized that we needed to bring researchers from like a breadth of expertise to Western Australia to build that capacity of saying, we don't want to just host the telescope, we actually want to lead the science. So that was the motivation for the ICRA, really the formation of the institute where I am, and the reason why we all ended up here. So I did come here because one of my good mentors invited me to visit. That was back in 2013 and 14. I came twice before I decided to move. And we saw opportunities, not just for me, actually for my partner, because as I said, we had this situation challenge. And he completely independently knew some of the people that were starting to work on the more data processing part of the SKA. So we realized we could have kind of a dual opportunity here where I could come to continue my kind of research journey, and he could come to contribute now to the SKA rather than ALMA. So that's how we ended up coming here. And he's still actually working with the SKA group here at ICRA. And my research broadened obviously a lot more. It's not just SKA related, but more, as I said, galaxy evolution and what the SKA will bring, like what are the pieces of the puzzle that the SKA will bring. So that was basically what brought me to UWA and to Western Australia. And it was one of the best decisions I think I could have taken in my life, because it's such a wonderful place to live and raise a family. I've got young children now, so definitely grateful for that opportunity. And I've seen as well how the CSIRO side of Western Australia has massively grown over the last years. Again, thanks to the SKA. So it's been kind of beautiful to witness that as well. So in terms of kind of in UWA, so I guess I felt at the time, I'm thinking back, 2017, 16, that I could probably take bigger risks in my research in terms of potentially do things that could mean wasting a lot of time or could mean something that pays off after a while. So that's when I decided, and also again, thanks to a lot of my mentorship here, that I was gonna put a lot of time into writing a new galaxy formation tool, a model from scratch. So that was where the challenge was. So I guess over the years, I had seen how some of the software tools people have built over, kind of organically for maybe 15 plus years were really hadn't been thought very well in terms of how they could grow. They potentially started as small projects and they kind of organically became bigger things, which make them extremely inflexible in some of the kind of addressing some of the problems that we wanted to address. One of them was kind of in my mind, it's always been understanding the ways in which any one important process can happen. For example, star formation. Star formation can happen potentially in many different ways. We don't know the details of how exactly that might happen, but we need to consider many plausible ways. So in principle, if you're interested in galaxy evolution, you want to know what each of these plausible ways looks like. But for that, you need a tool that allows you to do that in a flexible way. So that's when I was like, I'll just start from scratch. I'm going to go back to the whiteboard or blackboard, depending on what you prefer. And I'm going to think, how would I write this? What's the idea that would allow me to have that flexibility? So sure, I went through that process. And then as ICRO has a data intensive astronomy group. So then I went there and I said, I need actually software experts because I know what I need, but I don't know how to design that. And they helped me with that, actually. They say, this is a design that I think kind of follows what you're doing. So we iterated over that, of course. And that's when I started kind of building a lot of that architecture. That I wasn't sure whether it was going to pay off, to be honest. It was a lot of work. And we ended up publishing that in 2018, as kind of the first model. There was a whole statement there about the philosophy of what we were doing, that I think it was quite unusual for a paper, like certainly an astronomy paper, to make a declaration about what were the wishes of this in terms of, community building and so on. But I was like, I'll just do whatever I want by this. I put all this time, I'm just going to do it. So statement of wanting to give the community a tool that could be driven, that anyone could contribute to, and that look, like this open source galaxy formation model that was very flexible. And then we started, obviously, from there, developing it a lot further and testing, different pretty difficult questions people have come with over the years that were not solved, and that we were suddenly seeing that maybe a lot of those early conclusions were really driven by the fact that people were not exploring enough, as I said, plausible options for how to model any one process that happens in galaxies. So that's, I guess, what is recognized now as one of the main impact this had. But at the time, obviously, I just took the risk, and I mean, I did have fun, of course, so that kind of paid off. But it's very nice to see how that has grown into this much bigger thing, into this realization of this dream of having a tool that became a community tool. I don't take ownership of this. I feel like everyone is part of that. And I've seen now, entire PhDs being done completely independently. No, I'm not involved, and they're using this, right? And so I don't know. It's been like probably one of the most rewarding things of my career so far.
Honestly, that sounds so inspiring and rewarding and fulfilling. And something that I've noted throughout everything that you've been talking about is that you have been talking about not only taking a risk or taking on challenges and having that kind of like investment in yourself to know that the direction that you're going is where like is right for you and it's right for. But the other thing that I really have picked up is your emphasis on community and your emphasis on like building a culture of like sharing and yeah, inspiring others to be part of this process. It sounds like you're very, very involved in the work that you're currently doing and what you've been doing. But what kind of work would you want to get involved in the future? And would you be carrying those kind of values with you? And what do you see for the field as a whole for the future?
Yeah, those are great, challenging questions, actually. In terms of, I like in the last maybe couple of years, I've started broadening the type of activities I'm involved in. So I'm still very much like a research-driven person. That's where that's my happy place. But and that looks like some of the activities.
Claudia, we just had a little bit of a jump
sorry.
there. If you could just restart the question.
Yeah. So I was saying that in the last 2 years, I've kind of have spent more and more energy into non-research activities, but that kind of build the research community that we're in. So some of that was alluded to by Vanessa, and she's part of that actually. She's a great advocate for a lot of the things we want to build in the community. And that looks like, taking maybe some of these more leadership opportunities, like, being now a vice president of the Astronomical Society of Australia, taking jobs in editorial boards of journals, and kind of potentially maybe hopefully driving a bit of cultural change in some of the things that we see are problematic. I started some of that many years ago, but I guess in the last 2 years, it's looked like an increasing portion of my time. Potentially advocating for where, where astronomy science is moving towards. I've got a couple of roles in science advisory boards and committees in Europe, actually, so I have to go quite often there, where we discuss that. That's basically what we are talking always, like the whole direction in which things move, making sure, we're not, as a community, we're valuing all the potential things astronomers might be interested in, that not one subfield ends up eating another subfield and that kind of thing, like really trying to have a more equitable approach to how we are investing our telescope time and that kind of thing. So that's the more potentially more community activities that I've been involved in. Research-wise, I'm kind of, in the last year or so, I've been pushing to explore more and more these questions in the very early universe that are starting to pop everywhere, thanks to these observations that we're getting from the James Webb Space Telescope. It's been fascinating to see, actually. I was on maternity leave when it was launched and the first results started to come up. So that was quite overwhelming, but I think after like 3 or so years, the dust is starting to settle. And we're kind of seeing huge, really fascinating discoveries that are of how galaxies are in the very early universe that is not what we expected. It looks quite different to what we expected. And that's the challenge we need to take as kind of more theoretical astrophysicists. What is it that is so different in these conditions of the early universe? So that's kind of in my research time, that's where I'm going to, but kind of trying to balance all these different roles and making sure that, given the position I'm in, where I can potentially have a bit more sway into where we go as a community, to try to use that obviously for the advantage of everyone. So it's kind of learning as well to how you best do that. It's always a learning curve.
Yeah, it sounds like, well, something that you seem to have always embraced. It sounds like a challenge that's ahead.
Certainly.
um, just given your early experiences and that it's International Women's Day, I was wondering if you would be able to express or share with us some of your thoughts on specifically gender equality and diversity in astronomy and astrophysics, and how we could possibly support girls and women who would like to be part of the broader science community and their broader scientific endeavors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a huge challenge. And see, I think since quite early on, I realized this is not looking great. So when I was at university, we didn't, I'm undergrad, I mean, we didn't have any female faculty. They were all guys, and there were quite a few. It's not that there were 2 or 3, actually. There were maybe 10 plus, and they were all guys. And at the time when I was an undergrad, I didn't speak English much, to be honest, but we had a very prominent astronomer, Vera Rubin, visiting the institute. This was back in Chile. And she gave this talk. I probably understood 10%, but that 10% was very significant. And she said something on the lines of, when you look for opportunities or where you're going to go, a job you want to take, or a studentship you want to take, if there's no female faculty, run away, something like that. And I was like, well, that's a bit late because I'm here and this is not great. So it became kind of, she gave, in my world, let's say, she put a light to the problem, right? That's something you, obviously you do notice, but maybe not fully rationalized. And when she put it, course, I was like, this is bad. This is actually looking terrible. Like there's no female faculty. They did hire one, and with that they rested, right? Perfect tick. And then when I went to do my PhD in Durham, I'd say it was even worse, to be honest. It was like the lack of women was at every single level from students upwards. So I kind of became better, then I started seeing more where the issue actually manifests. So one is the obvious one, right? Oh, there's no women, but what's the impact, right? What's the consequence? And then you start to see things like you've got these women that are doing amazingly, but no one is seeing that because the guys are so focused in championing the other guys, right? That they forget about this. So I started seeing more of this. I had great girlfriends in my PhD too, and so we could bounce ideas, discuss, and so maybe 2 years later, we actually organized a kind of symposium within a bigger conference. So every year there's an annual meeting of the European Astronomical Society where about 1,500 people attend. So it was in one of those that we actually organized a workshop around and some of these issues. And that kind of also started motivating me to maybe steer more the pot. And I then followed that by organizing a dedicated discussion day at the European Southern Observatory. I like looking back, I was very lucky in that I was in places that had funding so that I could actually, every time I went and I say, I don't astronomer only discussion. I want to invite people who actually understand about the issue. That could be social sciences or whatever. But I need to pay them because, these are professional people. They can't do this out of charity. And that was supported. I managed to invite people that were kind of looking very early on. So I'm talking maybe, 10, 15 years ago about authentic leadership and things that I think people are more familiar with now, but back then to me sounded alien, completely alien. So those were great opportunities to hear from women in other areas as well. At engineering was much worse. And I guess I hadn't probably realized at the time that was the case. and the extent to which they were trying to go to attract women, and then eventually realizing we're not going to succeed, we need to go, to maybe high school and start mentoring some of these girls so that they feel empowered to go into engineering. And then when they are in engineering, giving them the chance to experience, how it is to work in different industry. So it was a much more involved job, basically. So that's kind of how it all started, I guess. I mean, it still meant like, probably a smaller fraction of my time in terms of how I was spending that. But I feel quite proud in some of these steps that I on, and in talking to Michelle as well in preparation for this, that reminded me that I was actually part of the first group that wrote the first ethics statement for the European Astronomical Society. And that looked a lot into equity, diversity, inclusion, but also in other kind of aspects of research like ethical publishing and standards and things like this. So that was kind of now back in 2016, so almost perfectly 10 years ago. So yeah, that was kind of those early steps that I took. When I moved to UWA, I had a DECRA fellowship. And then I was actually pretty lucky in that it was around the end of my fellowship that the Center of Excellence Astor 3D got funded. And that was led by Lisa Cooley, that maybe many of you have heard about. She of work on the sphere of women in science. And she personally decided to go to every node of the Center of Excellence, talk to the DVCRs, and convince them that they needed to open women-only faculty positions. And that's how I was hired, actually, and a friend of mine here as well. And before that, there was just one female faculty here at ICRA. It's still not great. That was it. But that advocacy that Lisa did, that changed the landscape, because she did this in many universities. So I think if you go now to my generation, there's much better representation of women. And in great part it's because of that work she did. And that really, for good or bad, because when I got that job, I hear things like you would hear regardless, you only got this because you're a woman. We are compromising quality for gender, that kind of thing, right? And then I realized, that hurts, obviously, when you first hear it. But then I realized people will say that regardless. There's always going to be people that will say that regardless. So then I relaxed and I said, I don't have to demonstrate that anything to those people. I'll just keep doing what I do. And I think we've demonstrated that they didn't have to compromise on quality. So yeah, so it's something I feel passionate about. I wish I could spend more time. I had to give up a lot on those activities when I myself went on maternity leave twice, because there's only so much you can do on, the hours a day you have. But I want to continue that, and those and of them, and also the intersection of some of these angles of diversity of being women or international, or in Australia a huge thing, it's racial status and Aboriginal representation, and so these many angles that we want to be able to tackle, and potentially doing that in a holistic way. So not just focusing on one angle, but actually thinking more broadly on the culture you want to promote.
Yeah.
And hopefully that looks like an inclusive culture for many people, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I love to do more. I'm happy with what I've done, but I feel like with time, I'd love to put more energy on this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just listening to the entirety of your story that we've heard today, like 3 big things have stood out to me, and that's that you challenge, that you champion, and that you are all about community. Like, I think that you should be so proud of the work that you've done in the field of diversity, especially in sciences. Thank you so much for having this chat with me. It's been so amazing.
No, thanks to you. And thanks for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun, actually, to even prepare for this.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, Claudia, I do know that you have a few more photos and
Yes.
possible videos you can share with us to finish it off. Thank you, Brie.
Yeah, I can do that. Actually,
If the
some of
share
those.
screen function works.
Yes. Let me see if I can quickly grab the right one. Yeah. Yeah. So I did show you the mountain, which is I absolutely love. But this is a little bit of the things that kind of reflect on that journey of women in science, I guess. So this is some of the early work I did when I was in Europe, looking at this is actually I went to the European Parliament for a day on women in science. That was quite an interesting chat, actually, because even among women, and even back then, there were quite divergent views about quotas, about what they call at the time positive discrimination. They probably use different reasonable wording right now, but that was very interesting, actually, to discuss. This were women, leading their fields in very different areas and in different countries in Europe, so from very different cultural backgrounds as well. And this is, I'm very proud of this. This is actually my poster for the event I did at ESO and looking at women in STEM. And that was probably the first time I was thinking of women in STEM rather than women in astronomy only. So that was actually a lot of fun. And something Vanessa alluded to, which is what was kind of the recognition I got in Chile for some of the these awards that I was getting, but something I found really nice, it was actually put within the umbrella of what women are doing, actually. Chilean women in this sense are doing worldwide. So that was quite nice. And let me see if I can move forward. Yeah, this is a little bit more of kind of the work of I've done here at Australia, looking at mentoring, professional network among women. So some of these are my students. This is this theoretical tool I was talking about is called Shark, so that's why what I'm wearing.
Shark is the program, but you also have a mascot as well.
Exactly, we should have a mascot, yeah. And this was quite a fun idea. It didn't fly, but this is actually in a conference. We're all wearing this brand called Desigual. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it. It's a Spanish clothing brand that's called Desigual. And I thought, maybe we'll take a photo. We can convince them to put money into something like L'Oreal, give us money for research. We all wear your clothes. It didn't fly, but it was a good try. And this was actually in a conference I organized in 2019 that we had a huge turnout of women. So we were so happy. And this was actually in the conference dinner to all, go together and take a photo and kind of celebrate the fact that it was amazing kind of to see the audience in the room and seeing how many women at different seniority levels we had. Many of these were actually in Australia. There still are, and I love to see them actually often. So, yeah.
And have you got the, I know there's videos too.
Yes, if you're
Of the
keen about,
if you have
yes.
time to show us.
Sure. Yeah, this is kind of journey of being a mother as well, which is a whole different topic. But yeah, I just wanted to, I'm assuming people are also keen here to hear all the science. So I'll just show you one video of what
This
is
is
it
what
that we're
Shark
trying to
can
do. Exactly. Yeah. So this is the question we're trying to address. So what you saw at the very beginning, just post that before I even start so you can get an idea of what you're going to see. What we're trying to do is to understand galaxies, right? How they form in the universe. But the universe is actually dominated by dark matter. So galaxies kind of grow and form in this skeleton that is primarily set by what dark matter is doing. And that's what you see here in this simulation. This is the purple to yellow field. This is showing you where the dark matter is. So the video shows a way to show you where the galaxies are and zooms in into a particular space in which many galaxies live together. This is what we call a galaxy cluster. and show you how different galaxies in those kind of environments might be compared to galaxies that don't live in these very high density environments. So this is fading away now to show you where the simulated galaxies are, and kind of flying through this cosmic web to first give you a sense of how galaxies trace that cosmic web, right? Because if you talk to cosmologists, they think of galaxies as, test particles that tell you where the dark matter might be. In my case, I'm interested in what galaxies are telling us as well. So this is actually now zooming into one of these galaxy clusters and focusing now on the galaxies that live there to show you how different those galaxies might look like. So very kind of rounder, maybe less of these spiral arms, and now fading again to show you where the dark matter is. And really how these structures are connected, right? Potentially, if you just see this in galaxies, you might not realize so clearly that there's these huge filaments that are feeding the structure. And it also, I love these kind of videos because it also really gives you a very vivid sense of how dynamical the universe is, right? And obviously in astronomical terms, right? We're not expecting changes in our lifetime, but in astronomical time scales, these are extremely active, dynamic structures. So this is what we're trying to understand. This is the problem. And we can visualize the kind of theoretical models that we have in this way. So yeah, I just wanted to share that little more.
That's fabulous. I knew it there, and I know most of us love having a look at that sort of thing. And I can't quite wrap my head around that you've managed to create software which you deliberately made open source. Bravo you. That can model the universe and all of these details. And so thank you, Claudia, for that. And thank you, Bree, so much for being our interviewer today. We're going to
open the invitation.
We're going to open up to... Yeah, if that's working. We're going to open up to questions. So if anyone has a question, pop your virtual hand up so that Anthony knows to unmute you and pop your camera on. You can pop a question in the chat. We'll take the hands up before the chat question. And we don't have a lot of time, so if you really want your question asked, please do pop your hand up. And I think Vanessa had one to start us off, if you wish to, Vanessa.
Sure. Yeah. I guess, this can be a really quick one because I think you have covered it a lot and also awesome, like really cool to hear about all the different things. I guess you sort of alluded to it, right? Like there's a lot of really big challenges to solve. Diversity and equity is one of them. It's a changing world climate all the time, both in many ways. So I guess, what do you see? Like there's sometimes this attitude that, science is science and the world is over here and we don't necessarily have to worry about that. What's your take on that? And like, what do you see as like an individual science? What's our obligation to do something or to not do something? And like, how do we make a difference? And how do we come together and make a bigger difference?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I'm always been very politically active since very young age. I think that's my dad. He's, I grew up in a dictatorship too, so that makes you pretty politically active, I think. So a lot about justice and things like this. And I definitely don't see myself or as a community that we should ever think of ourselves as being in any form or shape separate of what's going on. And I think the Astronomical Society previously has actually done a great job in pronouncing our big topics and having understanding when there are bigger societal issues affecting Australia. I see actually a lot right now of impact in our younger people, in our students, of how they feel about their future and their hopes they've got about the future. So I feel like first of all, I think as a community, we need to care for each other a lot. And we need to be understanding and empathetic, especially of the young people, and understand that I hear a lot of maybe the more senior people saying, oh, it was also difficult at my time, or maybe harder, whatever. But it's like, no, no. No, you need to listen sometimes and understand that, you know, challenges for people, young people right now are very, very real and very different to the challenges we had. So that would be kind of at a community level, what we need to
Claudia,
do.
sorry to jump in just because we're getting close to time. Do you mind if I pop over, sorry, Vanessa as well, pop over to Cindy's question if Anthony can unmute?
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off there. I realize
No, that's all
asking
good.
you to show the videos and photos cut off a bit of question time, but I think everyone will say that's worth it. Cindy,
So,
you
yeah.
able to pop off mute yet?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. Big thank you, Claudia. I found that extremely useful and informative. And I think you touched on like how women themselves are diverse. So culturally, from different backgrounds, single women, women with children, age differences, and language differences. And your travels have really emphasized and embraced all of that. I think my question is a lot more of a sort of logical, on a ground level, local. What can us as leaders do, and not just women, but men and non-binary identifying leaders do to really help facilitate the development of all women?
Yeah. So one thing I realized in talking to the young people is that they want to see the differences. They want to be able to look at, you know, the people they work with and observe that diversity actually. So one thing is, I feel like we need to, everyone, be conscious in championing the people that maybe, you know, maybe our first reaction wouldn't be to necessarily champion those, because we tend to have this association bias, right? Whoever looks like us, well, that's the people we are going to mentor and champion. So I think making a conscious effort, first of all, in looking around. And when you actually look at your teams, you know, when you're bringing together a new project, for example, maybe also think more consciously who you want to have in your team and the example you probably want to give, from the way, you know, from just the people you've got to the way you communicate to, you know, the channels you open for people to ask questions or express concerns and things like that. So a much more, I think, conscious approach to collaboration, to mentorship, that these are things that we can do in our life, in our daily life, and we can action now, right? And so those are the things that are more tangible that I feel like we can do. And then obviously when you think a bigger scale, there's you need the advocacy of the senior, potentially more powerful people. And I feel in astronomy, at least, that there are some pretty good male senior champions that we've had. But change it's slow. That's the other thing people probably need to realize. Sometimes you might not see change, you know, in your lifetime, unfortunately, but we need to all chip towards that, I feel.
That is a absolutely beautiful place to stop and end. I'm so sorry that we've run out of time for more questions. I see a few other hands up and some questions in the chat. But as always, we run out of time at the end. Thank you so much, Claudia. I'm going to hand over to Susan Tonks, who's the Secretary of the Staff Association, to say a few words at the end, and then we'll come back and close up. Susan, are you able to hear us?
Coming.
There we
Just
are.
one moment. How can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Nope. It's happening. Hang on. Yeah, no, I've got it. Can you guys hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
sounds great.
Oh, there we go. Great, thank you. A bit of a technical challenge there for us in this room, but that's good. Well, firstly, I'd just like to say a really big thank you for Claudia today. Every year, the Women and Girls in Science event grows in popularity. It never fails to inspire us, you know, of the important work being done by women in science. Obviously, we don't just need more women in science. We need to ensure that women in science is not the exception, but the norm. It is, you know, incredibly important to do these forums, and thank you to Michelle and Bree and Anthony for all the coordination as well. That's been I know it's a big event that they all work together with, you know, furiously at the start of every year to fit it in with all the other things that come up in the calendar. But yeah, thank you so much, Claudia. It's really important to do this, and thanks for your passion and your brilliance, you know, in this space. We need lots of people to step up and do this every year, and you've filled a very important spot today for everybody. So yeah, and thank you again for presenting today. We really appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
Thank you for inviting me, and thanks to Michelle. The amount of effort she puts on this, it's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
Mostly I just love hearing the stories. I'm sorry we don't have, maybe we can make it 2 hours in the future. Thank you to everyone who's come along today. Thank you, Vanessa and Bree. Thanks, Susan. And most especially, thank you, Claudia. Yeah. As people are heading off to the next meetings, thank you for coming along. I wanted to end, for anyone that has a spare minute, just the one thing that, you know, despite, I know, along with Claudia being a real champion of diversity and gender inclusion, you've been a real pioneer as well. Just hearing about how many people were studying theoretical astrophysics, even in Chile, even in the European circles you're talking about, even in Australia, and how many, you know, you said yourself how many women are there, but put those two things together and then add on, you said even developing shark was a bit of a risk. So I just see pioneer, 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 and well done to you. And it must have felt quite terrifying at some moments, and, you know, a bit of a jumping off a cliff, but you've flown, and bravo. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Oh, really, thanks for giving me the chance to talk about these things. I don't think we have enough time to reflect even on our own lives, right, in a regular basis. So it's lovely to have that opportunity.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye. And we'll see you for another event next year. Bye, all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.